Greetings! In this video, I'll show you how to make twobees, the little shoes that are made for children who live in areas where they might get parasites if they're walking around with bare feet. Of course, twobees can be made for and worn by children and adults everywhere. Usually motorcycle inner tube for the soling, which of course is impermeable, so we can use leather, wool, or cotton, or even use synthetics like polyester, especially heavy duty like repurposed jeans. Hopefully motorcycle or wide bicycle inner tubes are available, and some sort of fabric is available just about everywhere. So I cut the sole using this pattern out of the inner tube. Then I had a glue stick, so I rubbed it all over the inner tube and then placed it down on a piece of the denim so that they're temporarily held together. I think you can use like Elmer's glue, maybe dilute it a bit. I've cut out the inner tube, the motorcycle inner tube. This will be the left foot. This will be the denim top sole. I used this pattern and cut out this upper, and I'm making a pointed top line. So I put it on top of the other piece because I want it to have two layers. I think that adds a lot of durability to the little shoe. What I'm going to do is put some glue stick on the back of this one, put it down here, cut out the lower one, and then I can have two that are exactly the same size. I have my two layers of upper, and I've cut two strips of fringe, or potential fringe. I have one tucked in here, and then I have to pull some fringe out of this one. I'm going to stitch these seams. First of all, if you have a sewing machine, great. There's no problem stitching two layers, or I guess three layers, including the fringe, of denim together. But if you don't have a sewing machine, then you can use a needle and thread, a sharp needle, and one of the threads I like to use is called artificial sinew. It usually comes in kind of a tan color, but I have this black, and it can separate into many plies, so you can get exactly the width of thread that you want. So I'm going to separate this, thread it through my needle, and I'll do either a 2-needle running stitch or a back stitch. Here's my sewn together fringed upper. I stitched along here with my stitch machine, and then I did a zigzag stitch around the edge so that it won't unravel. I'm ready to stitch this shoe together. So I've stapled it together. I don't want to break any of the threads of the denim, so that means I'm not going to use anything that removes a piece, so I'm not going to use a round punch, and I'm also not going to use a slit punch. So actually something like a nail is much better, because as you poke the holes through, it pushes aside the denim. It doesn't cut any threads of it so that it stays intact. So I'm ready now to stitch these two pieces together. I've started here at one corner and I've left a tail so that when I get back, after I've gone around once with the running stitch and then I fill in the spaces between the stitches and end up here again, then I can tie those two ends together and either make a knot and weave it under a few stitches, or I can light a match to the knot and then have something handy to press it with, and that would also keep it from coming undone. So I'm just going in one hole through all these layers. I'm still I have the staples there so that stays lined up, and then going in this next hole. Once you have the V stitched, then I used an iron to press open the seam as best I could. Then I'm going to turn it inside out and do top stitching to make this seam really flat and finished. Be sure to snip this little corner right, so that when you turn it inside out, you won't have so much bulk in that area. I've pressed these uppers open, and so now I'll do a stitching along here and the back seams, and then I'll do a zigzag stitch around the edge so that it's totally finished. Here's my upper. It's been top stitched, and notice that the top stitching goes down the heel as well, and then zigzag stitch around the edge. Now I'm going to sew this together on the sewing machine, just a regular home sewing machine. If you have the inner tube sandwiched between, this is the top sole and the upper, I can stitch it on my sewing machine without any problems. So hopefully you have a sewing machine like that too. Before stitching the upper to the sole, I did staple it together or use paper clips, whatever, so that it doesn't move around. I've stitched around this sandwich of fabric, inner tube fabric. I went around it twice just to make sure it was sturdy. So I'm starting at the toe, turning it inside out. And I'm going to keep working on it with something like a spoon to go in there and make sure it's totally turned inside out. I'm going to stitch the back of the heel by hand. So I've marked off 1/4 inch increments up this tab, across and down, and then I'll put stitch holes on the tab, and then I'm just going to do the tab individually so that I'm not punching holes in here. I don't need to since it's fabric. And I'm using this diamond tipped punch, but a nail would work just fine, so remember to put a piece of wood underneath and have some sort of a hammer and punch out these holes. I'm using a stitch that I call the diagonal and then the bar here. So I'm making a diagonal from this stitch hole to the next one on the inner tube. Then I'm just going to puncture the fabric across from it, since there's not, I didn't make holes in that because I didn't want threads to be broken. And you might want to use a pair of pliers to help pull this through. So I've got the diagonal here, and now I'm going to make a bar. So I'm going straight across, trying to go back into that same hole. So I get these little kind of Z looking stitches. So now to go to the next stitch, I'm going to do a diagonal. So I'm making a diagonal, and then the bar. So I'll do another stitch or two and then head across the top to stitch the fabric and the inner tube together at the back of the heel. At the top of this heel tab, I'm doing a stitch that makes little boxes. I'm going to the next stitch hole and then going over the top and then stitching back into that same hole. I'll go back to that diagonal and a bar as I complete this side.